thanks again, everyone, for joining. Today, we are talking about how health and wellness companies can get more press and more visibility in the press. And we cover things, for example, like what makes a story newsworthy. We also talk about, the do's and don'ts of actually, getting press. We talk about when to reach out, who to reach out to, and how to find people to reach out. And my favorite part, we also talk a little bit about mistakes and what to avoid when pitching the press. And I'm thrilled about the two people joining me because they see this from both sides of the inbox. We have on the one side Esha Chhabra, who's a journalist at Forbes covering consumer health, sustainability, and purpose-driven brands. And every week, Esha decides which brands are worth a story. So she brings the editorial perspective into the conversation. And then we have Hilary Morse. She's the founder of Hilary Morse PR. She spent years placing health and wellness brands in top tier publications, and Hilary brings the strategy to the conversation. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Susanne Mitschke. I am the co-founder and CEO of Citruslabs. Citruslabs is the leading provider of clinical trials for brands, and we work with supplements, functional foods, beverages, cosmetics, and pet health products, and help brands to substantiate their product claims and lead with scientific credibility as they grow their brand. And many of the companies we work with use press and PR about their clinical studies as a growth driver. And as always, some housekeeping before we start. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box of Zoom. If you can't find it, chat's also fine. And we will answer your questions at the end of this webinar. Esha and Hilary, let's do this. Before we start, can I get some very brief introductions from both of you, starting with Hilary?
Hi, my name is Hilary Morse, and I've been a publicist for 30 years, working on big consumer brands from Anheuser-Busch and Pepsi to Charlotte's Web, the first big CBD company, MedMen, the cannabis dispensary, so on and so on.
Amazing. And I'm Esha. I'm a journalist. I've been working in the media space for about 15 years now. Started my career covering public health, actually, and then it evolved into business. And now it's the intersection of business and environment and impact. And written for all of the major publications as a contributor, as a freelancer, and as even as a staffer, written for the New York Times, the Guardian, the Washington Post, Fast Company, Economist. So can speak to beyond just the Forbes column that I have at the moment.
Amazing. And both of you work with a lot of brands. You work with supplements, functional food, beverages, skincare, and essentially health and wellness as an industry. So my first question, and that's for both of you, is there a difference on how to approach PR depending on the category, or does the category really not matter? And Esha, why don't you start?
I think in general, if you're looking at PR strategy, it's really case by case. It's like, where is your business? What does your budget look like? What are your targets? Do you have something coming out that you want to pitch the PR around, for example, a new product, or like you said, there's new studies. So I think it really depends case by case. My advice would be that you can always start PR on your own as a founder if you want to, and try to reach out to the most well-known folks in that space, in that industry that you're in, and see if they're even open to a dialogue or open to having a chat with you. No hard pitches, nothing, just like a simple 15, 20-minute conversation where you can share a little bit about your work. And then when you're ready to hire somebody like Hilary or another firm, then it gets a little bit more formal. And at that point, I think if you're going to make that financial investment, you should be ready with something that you want to launch publicly as well. And it's also interesting because some brands will ask me, like, do I need to always have a publicist? And it really depends. If you're a company that can afford that, fabulous, great, like always have someone. But you can also tailor it where you work for 6 months, for example, with somebody, right? And you get some coverage during those 6 months. And then after the 6 months, maybe you take a little break and then you can pivot to some other platform that you want to focus on. So it really depends on the size of the company, the budget, and really where you are in your journey as a brand as well.
Nice. Hilary,
That's a
anything to
great.
add? Oh yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say that it's a similar strategy depending on what category you're in. I work with the brand on their calendar. It's milestones. It's either a money raise, it's a new product launch, it's retail expansion, that sort of thing. So I work on their calendars, and then you can work against cultural calendars too, or newsjack, see what's trending in the news and how you fit in and insert yourself in the conversation. Or there's always the famous PR stunt. I advise companies, especially small startups, to wait until you have some news, because we're going to get into this, but especially the current media climate, there's fewer journalists covering multiple beats. With AI and all these mail merge tools, the inbox is flooded. It's constipated. So you need to get above the noise, and you're just adding to it if you're just trying to use a lot of words to say nothing. So wait till you have something to say and put your best foot forward.
Great. And
I think
Esha, I want
great
to put you
advice.
on the spot.
Sure.
So let's say a pitch lands in your inbox. What's happening in your head when you look at that email?
So Hillary was right. I mean, the number of pitches we're getting are just kind of crazy. I mean, I was having this conversation with a friend this week only, and I was like, "Are you noticing this increase in the volume of emails?" And that is the challenge that we face now. Is that sometimes there are stories that I want to write about, people that I want to cover, and I just don't get to it, or I don't have bandwidth to do it, or I can't even like open the emails and read them all. So that's the challenge. So I would say, if you're going to send the pitch, try to keep it brief so that people do actually get a chance to read it. Don't like, sometimes I get these really long copies of like a press release and then like several paragraphs above it. I'm like, nobody's going to have time to read that, sadly. But also, like Hillary said, have a very clear story that you want to say in the first few lines or paragraph, so that it's very clear to the other person that this is what the takeaway is. This is why it's relevant now. When I started media, and it sounds like, I mean, it's been a while. And so it's like the who, what, where, when, why, right? Those were the questions that we were told, even as journalists, that you're trying to answer in a story. And as a publicist, you should be making them very clear in your pitch and your email. So it's like the who, what, where, when, and then the why being the biggest piece. So that's what I'm looking for. And I'll pause there. We can chat more about the no's and the some of the silly pitches that we get and the things not to do, perhaps.
Yeah, and we get to that shortly. But first, Hilary, let's go to your side of that inbox because you are the one sending emails to Esha. So how are you building a pitch so that you have Esha's attention? And can you walk us a little bit through how you decide on subject line, structure, and also how long it should be?
Right. Okay. So we've already established that these inboxes are so flooded. So I try to go alternative to email if possible, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, or a different way to communicate them, because I almost think people don't respond to their emails anymore. But that said, the pitch is in the subject. I try to have my header say it all. So I capture someone's attention to want to read more. I put a paragraph at most. And if I don't have a who, what, when, where, why, and why now, I push back on my client and say, let's make this more interesting. This isn't interesting. This isn't news. I have no problem saying that. This is not news. And I don't I don't think anyone wants 500 attachments or Google Drives that they have to pour through. I try to make this as easy as possible and ask if then I get engagement, I ask what they need to help make this a meaningful story. Whether it's written quotes, I've even done the written Q&A myself to help the journalist along. Whatever can help them, I jump into action.
And let's talk a little bit about wording. Hilary, are there any words or phrases you are avoiding, like specific buzzwords or anything like that?
Okay, yo no hablo buzzword. Okay. I don't like jargon buzzword or people who speak in marketing gobbledygook. If I don't understand what my client's saying, chances are the journalist isn't and the customer isn't, right? That it just feel it I'm direct, right? I try to get the point and sort of leave it up to the journalist to come up with their angle. But if someone's just using a lot of words and it makes no sense to me, it's not making sense to anyone else, is my takeaway.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I even, when we talk to brands and they pitch us what their product does, it's just sometimes like full of buzzwords, which is very interesting. And Esha, what are instant red flags that make you delete something immediately or just, ignore something immediately?
Hilary, did you want to add something? I saw that
I
you were
did. You saw me get so excited here because
excited.
there is something that I did want to add. I find those alienate people, all these buzzwords.
Uh-huh.
So I try to make whatever, if it's a product, I try to make it as relatable as possible. For example, I'm working on a organic, better for you, boozy um, soda pop from the Bai founder called Crooked Pop. And I just wasn't landing. So I said, can I ask the client, I said, do you mind if I describe this as a boozy poppy or a boozy olipop? Because people immediately, that's popular. People understand what I'm talking about. Um, and they were like, oh, yeah, 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 you do that. Or I worked on MedMen, the biggest, one of the first big cannabis dispensaries. And they kept describing it as sleek. And I was like, sort of like an Apple store. And they were like, yes, like an, I said, do you mind if I say the Apple store of weed? Took off. People got it. People understood what we were going for without a whole essay or brand positioning doc. So that's all I wanted to add. So that's what I do in lieu of buzzwords.
Nice.
That's a really good suggestion, Hillary. I remember like there was a time when a lot of companies would say, we're the Uber for, and it
Yeah.
was just, it helped make that connection really easily. In terms of no's or things that are red flags, I mean, to be totally honest, I don't think like red flags that would make me delete anything, but when I get stuff that's just too long and cumbersome, I'm not going to read it. If you have a lot of buzzwords, I'm not going to read it. Sometimes companies will make certain claims that I'm like, I don't know if you want to be making that claim. Like, for example, I happen to know the founder of this company. She's in the apparel industry, and her PR firm reached out to me and they said, we're the first with this particular fabric that they were launching. And I just, forwarded that email to the founder and I said, wait, I think you're wrong because there's other companies that have done this before. And she was so apologetic and she's like, I'm so sorry. And like, she obviously sorted it out with the PR team, but they don't try to like make things up and try to sell them more than they are actually true. So you don't need to exaggerate to that point. Because hopefully, somebody will do their homework and due diligence. And so you don't want to come out on the other side looking a bit silly.
Yeah.
And the industry that I've covered a lot, like these better for you brands, sustainable brands, people love jargon and buzzwords. So right now I'm seeing regenerative everywhere. It's kind of like the buzzword of the hour, right? And so sometimes it makes sense because you are truly doing something that might be regeneratively sourced or regenerative in nature, but then explain it very quickly, like even in a pair, even in parentheses kind of thing. But then I'll also see like companies where they'll say, oh, this is regenerative medicine. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like it's so broad kind of thing. So if you do want to use a buzzword or you do want to use a claim like that, just make sure that you can back it up or have like really quick bullet points where you explain why that's important to the identity of your company. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that Hillary said is pretty spot on. And brevity is like, if you are brief, you will get a response. If you're lengthy, it's unlikely.
And does personalization of the pitch actually matter to you, Esha?
I mean, there's been many emails I've gotten where like the name is wrong, or I get high X, because it's been put into some kind of list. So don't do that, perhaps. But I think personalization, I know it's really hard to like personalize 50 emails and write them. I think for me, the personalization is less important, to be honest with you. It's more just the clarity in the message, because I also understand that what my editor might be looking for is very different from what another editor might be looking for, right? So somebody might be a commerce editor, for example, or a commerce writer, and their job is really to like churn out lots of content every single day, maybe 5 stories a week. They're just looking for really basic information about a product. I'm looking for like an entrepreneurial story, so that might be something different. So they might not be able to do that much customization, but I think if you are able to nail what Hilary mentioned earlier, that why is this newsworthy? Why is it relevant now? You'll probably be able to address a lot of journalists and editors with their needs with that kind of pitch.
And can we talk a little bit about mistakes? So we already heard about, shouldn't be too long, shouldn't be full of buzzwords and jargon. And what are the biggest mistakes you see brands are making when they try to get media attention, apart from what we just discussed? Or is that really it? Hilary, let's start with you.
Yeah, this is pretty much it, is that they there really isn't news happening. So if a brand doesn't have that calendar of things we discuss, like milestones to discuss, and if you can't insert yourself into something's trending in the news, we call that newsjacking, offering expert commentary. And then there's always the if you're willing to do something fun and spend some money, or there's a PR stunt, or there's a beautiful way to fit yourself. If you're a functional food or beverage or a supplement, a plug for Citruslabs here is you can do a third party study and create news and data, do a biomarker study, talk to Citruslabs, see what works. I've had so many supplement brands who have their own science and their own studies. And if you just look on Reddit, or if you just do a deep dive and look at the comments, people are questioning that. It's not third party information. So this is just the number one mistake, is hoping to get PR without news, and you think you just push a magic button and the stories come back. But you need something meaningful to say that's relevant.
I would just add to that, Susanna, like oftentimes you can find a relevant theme. So, for example, for a lot of the better for you brands right now, GLP-1s are a really hot topic, right? But the GLP-1s, from what I understand, they're encouraging people to eat cleaner, to eat better quality foods, and to eat less food. So in a way, the two themes are connected for this kind of CPG brand, right? Is there a way that you can insert your brand into this larger conversation that's happening about this particular trend? That's one way to make that connection, where it might not be a whole feature story about your product, but maybe a journalist is writing at one of the kind of health and wellness magazines a piece about GLP-1s, right? Maybe she can insert a comment in there. He or she can insert a comment there. So there's different ways where you can think about what is happening right now, and how does my product and how does my company fit into that dialogue. And with all the platforms that are available now, like if your company has a Substack, or if they're on social media, even if you can create a little bit of commentary that you're sharing publicly, that also helps, because then it gives you visibility, and they'll be like, oh yeah, this founder was talking about this topic. Let me reach out to them for a comment. So those are also ways that you can kind of be a part of the larger conversation.
And speaking about topics, Esha, what type of stories are readers actually interested in? And you also talked about your editor, right? What's the editor interested in? And is there anything that is overdone at the moment, specifically in health and wellness?
I mean, the what my editors are interested in, I can share with you. It's very specific. So right now, because of AI, and because media companies are dealing with the effect of AI, they're looking for content that they can create that an AI could not create, right? So my editors have specifically told me, for example, like we would like more pieces where you're talking to people and they're sharing analysis insights about an industry, about running a company, about being an entrepreneur, like whatever it is. We want more specific anecdotal advice, kind of insight based content, and moving away from just doing what would have been usually a traditional feature of this is how I built a brand or this is how I built a business. And so that's what my editor is looking for. Now, that will vary from publication to publication and from editor to editor. But I think in the health and wellness space specifically, it's really about following what are the current trends at the moment and how can you kind of be a part of that conversation. There's also sometimes like if you have 50 brands that are all doing the same thing, like for example, after Expo West, there's so many pitches that you get that are around CPG, right?
Yeah.
And also supplements and health brands. It can feel overwhelming. So that might be a good time for a brand to actually say, unless I have something really meaningful to add to the conversation here, like maybe don't pitch at that time and wait a couple months later when it's eased up a little bit and then you can pitch about it. I just find that sometimes a lot of brands try to jump onto one of these kind of so-called news pegs, but it ends up getting lost in the flood of emails that you get.
That's great. Hilary, anything to add?
No, I think Esha got all that.
All right. Then let's also talk about timing. So Esha, you already hinted that, maybe directly after Expo West, it might not be a good idea to pitch a health and wellness brand. Um, when is actually the best moment to pitch? So obviously, you need a story, right?
Right.
And also, how do you connect a story to what's happening in the news?
Right, right. So some publications do have really clear editorial calendars, and I'll let Hilary speak on this because she's on that side of seeing it. So you can actually look at, like, especially, I should say the olden days perhaps, but like the print publications used to have very clear editorial calendars. So you can look at that and you can see what the editors are interested in. In September, we're doing an issue and it's going to be on this theme. In November, we're doing an issue, it's on this theme. So you can peg it accordingly. But in terms of timing for, digital publications, for me, for example, I do 4 to 5 stories a month. And so I'm only going to be able to accommodate that many stories every month. For other reporters, they might be churning out like 3 to 4 stories every week. So they're just looking for quick, short turnaround stories that they can, put out there. It really depends from the kind of story that you're pitching. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of commerce writers now because a lot of media publications do affiliate links. They do lists where they're showcasing the best products, the top 10 products in whatever category. Those kind of journalists are usually looking for content, like they're hungry for content because they have to produce a much higher volume of content. But if you're pitching, for example, a New York Times and their health and wellness section or New York Times wellness, like that, column, they're only going to be putting out X amount of content. So you have to be patient and know that you might have that conversation or even have that interview, but then it may not come out for 3 months later or 6 months later, and that's totally fine as well. In terms of timings, I would say for themes, obviously the traditional themes still stick. So the beginning of the year is still the popular time for health and wellness coverage. But then there's also, it's interspersed throughout the year. So it could be like in the fall, going back to school and feeling like on top of yourself as you're getting back to work and, that kind of thing after the summer fun. So there's also those kind of themes, but I'll pause there and let Hilary comment on all of that.
Yeah. So so we've got the brands calendar and then we have the cultural calendar. These are things like, the holidays. Then everyone overdoes it at the holidays, so the new year is the time for fitness. That's when the gym's overcrowded and everyone's doing their dry January and trying to lose weight. And then you have things like Mother's Day, Father's Day, back to school, summer. So if so you fit your brand, your product into these things, and then remember, if all else fails, you just create your own story with a study, with a stunt, that sort of thing. I'm going to give a little timing weird example here. It's pretty weird, but it just happened for me. So I have some cosmetic surgeon clients in Miami. It's a husband-wife team. She does faces, he does bodies. Their business is booming because of all this dramatic weight loss with GLP-1. So people who lose, if you lose 150 pounds, you need like your skin tightened too. But they were supposed to move offices, all these things that we were supposed to do announcements for got pushed back. And then I saw this bizarre trend making it in the mainstream called looks maxing, where it was a TikTok trend where young men were smashing bones in their face to get cheekbones and doing removing ribs. So when I started seeing it like 3 times in a week in mainstream news, I did expert commentary that I never had even heard of looks maxing till 2026. But I did, I got a feature in New York Post, International Business Times, all over the place. Just because I saw this happening, and I think I got in there first. My timing was perfect.
I think that's a really good point, Hilary. So much of the news cycle is now being connected to social media trends and online trends. So keep an eye out for that. Like fiber maxing is another thing now in the health and wellness space. Nona maxing is another thing. Like, can we live our summers like, our grandmothers? So there's a lot of content being created around that. And actually, it's interesting because I've had editors also mention to me that if we can connect with what is trending on social, it helps them with also getting more views, so it helps the media platform as well. So think about it in that sense also, like, is your story helping that media platform achieve their goals? And their goals are primarily always to get more views. So whenever you can connect it to something like that, it's a great idea.
And also speaking about goals of the media platform. So, everything we've talked about revolved around earned media. But there's also a whole other segment out there, the pay to play segment, which means like sponsored content, paid placements, advertorials. So for both of you, what do you think about that? Is that a real path to visibility? And also, do you think it's credible versus, earned media? Like what's more credible? Hilary, how about we start with
Well, well, okay. I only do earned media, but right now with like what AI and the way it looks at sources, earned media is a credible source,
you?
and sponsored paid for content is not. So earned media is always going to win. And there are a lot of people now, it's called performance PR, I believe, when you do the people who do all this paid content.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not always opposed to it. I like to give examples. So I did the launch of the first ketamine clinic back in 2020. It was a brick and mortar place in New York City, but with the pandemic, it went telehealth. It was called Mind Bloom. We got all the headlines, we got all the top tier press. And so 5 years later, I was asked to work on another ketamine clinic in New York, and the ketamine clinics had already saturated the media. And they were supposed to be opening a lot of offices, but that didn't happen. And we got an inbound from local TV, KPIX. They wanted to do a visit and talk to a patient, talk to a doctor. And it was going to look really good and not look sponsored. It was going to go on the website. And I suggested they did do it. It was $1,000 and everyone was happy and it looked great. So in that case, if you need and want coverage and can afford it, go for it. But there's certain companies that I look at all their press and it's all sponsored content, and it looks like that, and I do think most people see through that, right? Um, Time and place, not what I do. Earned is always best.
I would agree with that largely. I mean, I think that the media landscape has changed so much over the years as well. So when I started my career, it was very much so like church and state. You did not combine the two. But now media companies also need to build out their businesses, right? And their primary revenue source was advertising, which has depleted over as time has gone on. So they've had to kind of think about what are the different avenues that they can pull in. I've written columns like for The Guardian, for example. I remember writing a story that was about a fast fashion company, and yet the column was sponsored by the foundation of a fast fashion company. And the story was kind of being critical of fast fashion, right? So they were getting paid to be able to have this kind of content around sustainability, but it was clear at the top of the story, like this is sponsored by or funded by whatever the foundation was. Um, I think it's so embedded now in our media landscape that it really depends on how you do it, as Hilary said. So if all of the content is pay for play, yeah, that might look a little tacky. But if you are, for example, like local news stations here in Southern California, there's some local news stations outside of like LA, if you go to Palm Springs or if you go to some of the nearby areas, they are happy to do a TV spot for a couple $100s, right? And that's not a bad thing. So if you can afford to do that, and then you can get that TV spot and you can repurpose that on your social media and on your other platforms and share it, I think that's totally fine, because it's not also in a way where they're controlling the content in any way. They're still doing a traditional interview. They're still asking you questions. And it's very much so like traditional journalism would have been. You're just paying for that 30-second spot. That's the only difference. And I think that that's like, if you're not getting it through, other avenues and you need to explore that, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Affiliate marketing is very popular, right? And so that's not exactly traditional paid media, but it's also like the publication gets an incentive from it. And I would say some publications will actually prefer to work with you if you have an affiliate system already in place versus a company that doesn't have affiliate marketing set up. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with it per se.
Ooh, can I add something? Um, for those of you who don't know, you got to get with the affiliates because the way that works is you need to sign up on Skim Links because journalists use that so they get a click back. And there's a whole science and math equation behind all this. And I had a client a beauty product that I said they needed to, if they wanted to be in Allure, etc., in product roundups, they had to be working with an affiliate. Sure enough, I finally got them in Allure, and then they didn't use them because they weren't on Skim Links, and there was no way for someone to click on them and then the publication to get money per click. And they like obviously higher priced items because that means more money for the publication. And you'll notice that there's whole new beats you didn't know existed, like best products on Amazon, best products at Costco, best products at Target, because Amazon has the best affiliate program out there. So if a journalist covers that plus the products, they're getting like two kickbacks.
Yeah. I
The,
just add one more thing to this, Suzanne. It's just like,
yeah.
if you think about paid media, that's one way to think about paid media. The other thing is the whole like analog world of events and inviting media members to events and maybe paying for, a one-day trip or something like that. I think there's certain publications that do allow that. And if you have the budget to do that, that's a great way to start building a relationship with these journalists that you might not be able to get through to online on email because they're just getting flooded. I've noticed that as time has gone on, I'm responding more to people that I've met in person, I have a relationship with, I know them, we've worked together in the past. So it's becoming very important also, is like, can you host a small intimate event, invite these people in, get to know them on a personal basis, and then hopefully that encourages a relationship where you do get coverage down the road.
It's kind of outside the box pay to play.
Yes, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
great. Yeah, and Esha, I think with the affiliate links, that's what you mentioned earlier as well, right? When you look at the editorial calendar of outlets that they're having, for example, Christmas lists, for example, the top, I don't know, the top Christmas gifts for moms, probably like that, right? And then
Yes.
your brand will be featured. Cool. Nice.
Yes, exactly.
Well, last question for both of you before we go into the Q&A audience. So if you have questions, now's the time to put it in the Q&A box. What's one thing you wish every brand knew before they ever hit send on a pitch? Hilary, let's start with you.
Well, I would ask them, well, I do ask them. I suggest they do a little exercise and go find the dream story they want for their brand. Like, go, please show me the story you want. And then let's unpack what you need to do to get there. It's sort of like if your kid wants to go to Harvard, right? What do you need to do to get in? What GPA, what extracurriculars? Like, what does that look like? So I say to a brand, show me the headlines you want in the outlet, and then let's kind of go through what we need to do to get there. So it's a win all around. Because a lot of times I find they don't realize, and also this is sort of an interesting thing I have to bring up. $50 million isn't a lot anymore. Like I'm talking about like a money raise or so things that I used to think were significant or interesting. You know, when we just see that like Tom Steyer just spent over $1 billion on it to run for governor or Michael Bloomberg. Like when I come back, when I've set pitched like Bloomberg and I've said, oh, we raised so much money or this, that, and they're like, it was like that with inflation and trillion, soon to be a trillionaire, like that the amount of money people thought was impressive just isn't anymore. That's something I've discovered.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very true. The numbers have just gotten more and more inflated. I agree with what Hilary said. Work backwards. That's a great tactic. The other thing I would just say is like, don't be disheartened if you don't hear back. Just know that you have to like, if you can, you have to try different avenues, right? And so I get probably, I don't know, like 250, 300 pitches in a day. I can't read them all. I can't respond to them all. So what I try to do is I try to read, skim through as many as I can. And then the ones that do interest me, I'll respond to them. Um, and so if you want to send it again a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, like send it again. And I don't think most people will mind as long as it's not being, incessant and you're just being annoying about it. But like if you just space it out and you send it again, totally fine. I think just don't be disheartened if you don't hear back. Try a different channel if that's really the journalist that you want to go to. And if you get nowhere with it after a couple months of trying, then, like move on to somebody else that you want to target. But I just think that in today's very noisy world that we live in, it's really a game of like tenacity and persistence also.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes absolute sense. Just following up, right, without being annoying,
Yeah.
is, what you should do. And also, what Hillary mentioned with like starting at the end and then seeing like what you need to get there is I think that's how you probably go through most things in life. So same thing also with PR. And Esha and Hilary, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I also want to give the audience the opportunity to ask more questions. So once again, please put your questions into the Q&A box. I see we have already 8 questions, so that's great. Before we answer your questions, Esha and Hilary, where can people find you and how can they reach out to you? Hilary, why don't you start?
Um, I will just give you my easiest email address. It's my name, Hilary, Hilary, at hillarymorse.com. So you can just shoot me an email if you want to find me.
Perfect.
And you can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I'm not very active on Instagram, but you can find the email address where you can pitch me on there as well. So those 2 platforms, you're welcome to reach out. I also have a website. You can send me through the website as well. I'll see those emails as well.
Fantastic. Well, let's get to all of these questions. There are many. All right. Let's start with so there's one question around affiliate marketing. I also find it fascinating, affiliate marketing. Please tell me more about starting with affiliate marketing and how to get mentioned in Allure. That's a very specific question.
Hillary, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I'm assuming whoever asked the question as a beauty, Allure is a beauty magazine, so I'm assuming you have a beauty product. So look into a company called AWIN, AWIN. Just Google it and look at what you need to do. And you need to get on skim links because that's what the journalists use. And again, I just had to educate myself on this. Affiliate marketing's new-ish. I think something like 30% of companies or less in 2020 were on it, and now like 90%. So you're just missing out if you're not doing it. So call up one of these companies, ask how to get on it, and then for Lure, I would start looking at what you see. Just read articles in Allure and see how your company would be relevant to one of those stories. They do a lot of lists, like the best lip gloss, the best sunscreen, the best all of that.
And then,
Apply for their awards.
nice. Did you get one?
Did I get
An award?
on Allure? Still waiting.
Nice. Well, fingers crossed. Um,
Yeah.
One question I also think is very interesting is how important is a founder's personal brand to getting coverage for the company? Because now, a lot of founders, they are celebrities or they are influencers. So does that play a role in it?
I
Ooh, go
mean,
first.
for me, it's not a thing. I'm not looking at their Instagram following and deciding whether or not I want to write about them. But I know that it can also play to your advantage. So it's really a question of, do you want to do it? Do you want to be public as a founder? It definitely does open doors. I've seen it open many opportunities for folks where you can be on panels, you can do talks, you can be seen as a thought leader in the space. Um, so yes, but is it a requirement? No. I mean, there are founders who are building businesses very quietly as well, which I actually find really interesting in today's kind of crazy media world. And they're building really successful large businesses as well. So I don't think it's a requirement. I feel like for women, it's more so even a thing. I see more women founders having to do this or feeling like they have to do this. So if you feel like it's forced, don't do it. If it comes natural to you and you want to do it, go for it and do it. But yes, it is one of the playbooks, but not the only playbook.
And another very interesting question. Do journalists actually use press releases anymore, or is that a waste of time?
Um, in terms of reading them, if you send me just a press release, no. But if I'm doing a story and there's something like, for example, you're launching something or there's something newsy that you've written up a press release, it can be an important like informational document that you can use for reference to just make sure you get the facts right. But if you're just sending out a press release, no, we're not reading it. That said, and Hillary can speak to this, there is a tactic out there, which is that if you do put the press release on a PR newswire kind of thing, it does help. It used to help with SEO. I don't know about now with
It
AI.
still does.
It does. So that's, from that advantage, it might be worth doing it.
So press releases, I encourage them more than ever because to maybe try to do like four a year, but again, only if you have some interesting or material news. Don't just write up a press release. Um, it's one of the top things that AI references because you can't just write a press release. Like PR Newswire vets it, so it's a credible way to get news out there, and so it's great like that. And Esha's not a journalist who covers like when a press release goes out, but news people do, and a lot of the trades. So if you're in the beauty world or the supplement world. That's the sort of thing that they love in those trades. And if you really want to amplify whatever you're putting on the press release, a tactic I use, if it's interesting, is I try to shop around an exclusive. So I'll go to Forbes and I'll say, I'm going to give you this to you first. You can have a founder interview, and your robust story can go out with the word exclusive, Business Insider, Bloomberg, whatever. That's something we try to do. It can sometimes be quite humbling, though, if I think I have the most fascinating, earth-shattering news, and I go to 30 people who like don't even respond. And then I go to that safety, that trade. But I like to have an exclusive. It's guaranteed coverage.
And this is probably more relevant for larger companies. If a brand has had bad press in the past, how do you rebuild trust with journalists?
Okay. Well, how bad is this press? So you need to correct whatever the bad the best way. God, there's some statistic out there I'm gonna misquote, but it's like for every one negative thing you need pe seven positive to counteract it or something. But I find the best way to deal with that. And there are crisis communication people. If you're having a real problem, you should invest in some crisis communications and get a proper strategy. But just address what the issue is. Um, and don't go back to the press until you have something to say that you've like corrected the mistake or you fired the offensive person or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm actually just thinking about, some, I think some products, they had salmonella or something in it, for
Yeah.
example, right? Is
Yeah.
that actually bad press or is it just it happened? And now we did all of the corrective action. Like, is that something you have to recover from?
Oh, I think that's like just in an unfortunate
Yeah.
circumstances, unless it's happening repeatedly. Because a company's not doing that intentionally. I think like bad press is more if they were like lying about ingredients.
Mhm.
I just add to that also is like what Hillary said is that how bad is it? Because you'd be amazed, like you might think it's terrible, but things move so quickly these
Yeah.
days in the news cycle. So 3 months later, 6 months later, people might not even remember it and it might not even be an issue. So don't perhaps stress about it, especially if you've already dealt with the issue, right?
Yeah.
I'll share a story where there was like a founder who reached out to me. They are a food business and they had a terrible story featured in one of the major publications about their practices. And it was an agricultural story. And they were just like, what do we do? And they put out a very clear statement on their website, acknowledging the mistakes that they made and then correcting wherever perhaps the journalist got some of the story wrong. And that was enough. And they didn't lose any of their clients. They didn't lose any of their certs. They didn't lose anything. And a few months later, nobody remembered it. So I would also just like take a breather and realize like how bad are we talking here?
Yeah. I'm also just thinking about, I think last year there was the story around that creatine gummies don't contain any creatine, right? But now creatine gummies are booming, right? Nobody is like caring again about that. The gummy environment can actually break down creatine. Great. Good for them. And how can you actually measure whether PR is working, especially when it doesn't directly drive sales? Or should PR always drive sales?
Well, I think that that's a downstream benefit of PR. You're trying to build credibility, trust, visibility, and reinforce your brand's messaging. And then downstream benefits are, client acquisition, customer acquisition, or sales, or that sort of thing. It's tough to measure. It's tough to measure. You know when it's working, but the key ingredient is a quality product, with efficacy. Because if your product doesn't work and you have brilliant marketing and have spent a fortune on packaging and celebrity endorsements, maybe you'll get first-time buyers, but you won't get repeat customers. So that's on the brand to create something awesome. There's a lot of ways to measure good press. As I said, are you building credibility, visibility, that sort of thing? Is a story reinforcing your message, telling your story?
What I found when we got press is we were approached by a lot of investors as a result. So that could also be,
Yeah, that's another one.
yeah.
Yeah. It's 100% what Hillary said. It's so interesting also because you could be featured in a listicle where there's an affiliate link. And so there you can see very clearly how many hits you're getting, how many products you're getting sold. And sometimes those do really well. But then you could be featured, like I had a friend who's a founder, she was in the New York Times. And she thought it was going to be just, the next day, like amazing for his business, for her business, but it wasn't. It was like a slow buildup afterwards. And she saw the effect of that maybe a year down the road entirely, when she ended up having people reaching out to her to want to carry her product. But it wasn't immediate. So I think you have to kind of see each platform also a little bit differently. Like the kind of stuff on Forbes, for example, I've had people come back to me and say, oh, we use this and it was really helpful with fundraising, or we use this and it was really helpful with this next business acquisition that we were looking at. But it's not like, okay, tomorrow you got 10,000, sales. And so it just depends from platform to platform and nature of the story.
All right, so I have two more questions, and I think we have time for two more. First, this is when it first, I think, building up to that question, is a product launch these days newsworthy?
It can be. It depends on the product. Okay. Is it a Me Too product? Is it something that there's already a lot of and someone's just jumping on the bandwagon and creating a new something? Something has to, I think it has to be the why. Is it new or different? Is it solving a problem? So we have to take a few things into consideration. But typically, a product launch should be newsworthy.
And how far in advance do you pitch around a product launch?
I start pitching about 3 weeks out because I try to lock in. I run a little anxious, so I like to lock in an exclusive to guarantee some coverage because, and that's also a really good way for me to learn what's landing and what's not. It's a way for me to experiment. I can like A/B test different subjects and headers, see what's getting people's attention. If something's not working, I go back and I'll try to find a comparison. Like I said, if I'm pitching out that new organic boozy hard soda and whatever I was saying wasn't working, I try the boozy poppy that gets attention. So a new product launch should be newsworthy, but it all depends. What do
And
you think, Ash?
oh yeah, Ash, please.
New product launch. I think it depends also if it's like your first product and you're just starting the company, it's probably hard. But if you're an established brand and you're launching a new product, it's usually a little bit easier because you already have some traction and you may have existing relationships. So I would say go back to those journalists, go back to the people that perhaps wrote about you in the past and share with them what you're doing. But yeah, if it's a new product, it's a new company launch, that's a little bit harder to cut through. And that's where if you can tie it into the trends or, connect with somebody, like a lot of times you're seeing these collaborations, right, with well-known personalities. And that's what the benefit is that they bring, is that they help you get eyeballs, particularly in the beginning when you might need it the most.
And last question for today. What are the best ways to find relevant journalists and publications?
Well, I have some PR tools that the average person doesn't have, like Muck Rack, which has is a database of every journalist, what they're what they've written recently, because people move around. So if I thought someone was at Allure, and now they're not, they're at Fit Insider. So good old Google, just Google it. You can try AI too. AI is terrible at telling you which journalist to pitch. It's the pits. But it can give you ideas if you say, this is what I'm doing, what kind of people cover this. Or something I do is if I have a new product, some area I've never worked on, I'll look at the number one competitor or the biggest product in that field and do an audit, see who's talking about it, and get ideas who covers it. Do my homework.
Yeah, I mean, I second that completely. There are a few other tools that are cheaper than Muck Rack that have come about that weren't designed specifically for media, but you can find email addresses on them, much like CRM tools. So if, a Muck Rack or some of the others are a little bit more pricey for you, you could look into one of those if the goal is just to get emails, for example. But also, you can often find email formats really easily these days. And so they're not that hard to find. But I always just say, like, look at a competitor, look at somebody in your industry who's covering them. It's likely going to be the same people that will be covering your product as well. And just make a list. And it doesn't have to be a massive list. Like, you can come up with 30 to 50 names, right? And then just focus on those. So that would be my targeted take if you have a smaller budget to work with.
There's another great media tool out there that I'm really having some success with. It's called Quoted, and top tier journalists um, want sources. They want experts. So, if you've got a supplement company and you have a doctor on your board who can speak to it, uh, all day long, they're asking for doctors to comment, about some new GLP-1 study, there's some new sunscreen that just came out, right? Do you know what it's called? That's from Switzerland that the FDA here just approved. So all everyone's talking about on Quoted. Um, that sort of thing. So and that's a way for me to meet new journalists too. I've had a lot of success on Quoted. Muckrack and Quoted are not cheap though.
How about Hillary? How about Press Hook? Have you ever used that?
No.
Oh, that's
Help.
another one.
Enlighten me.
I've never used it, but I somehow ended up on their listserv. And so I get their emails. And I think there's a couple like Press Hook out there. So if you don't have the budget to hire a publicist, you basically can feature your company on there for a smaller price. And it's like a curated list. And they do health and wellness and they do beauty on there. And so it's much cheaper. And then a journalist can, request samples, they can reach out, they can connect, and you can also put your updates, your press releases, all of that stuff on there. So there's a couple of these new, more innovative companies coming around for, smaller cost.
There are a million companies because they're flooding my inbox that sort of are like AI meets mail merge
Yeah.
meets, and they want me to pay a fair amount of money, and then they spam journalists, podcasts, and Substacks. And I've tried a few, and I haven't found it effective.
I would also just say, lastly, is like you'd be amazed how many big, well known personalities are still like reading their DMs and reading some of their messages. So, don't be shy about just like reaching out to people. I was really surprised to know like one very well known podcast host that we all probably have heard of, like he's actually reading his own DMs and Instagram, and so it's sometimes we make it more complicated than we need to. And so just make a list and start reaching out to folks.
Oh, on that note, that was a great point. If exactly that, follow people on social and LinkedIn, comment, message them, compliment them, engage with them. And you're absolutely right. I've seen people announce things on LinkedIn and I message them and congratulate them, and I can't believe they wrote me back.
That's amazing. Yeah, just, reach out. I like to think that everyone is just cooks with water, right? And most people are actually very friendly if you just engage with them and just build a relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, Esha and Hilary, thank you so much, for joining us and for leading this webinar on PR. And to our audience, I hope you found it useful. And again, thanks everyone. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for including me. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.